of Directors of GRTC, and we'll begin with public comments. And who's got those? You've got those, Karen, right?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I do have several public comments which were submitted before the 5 p.m. deadline yesterday to be read at the board meeting. The first is from Fritz Miller. Hello. As a nearby resident, I was surprised when I saw a sign saying GRTC was reestablishing a bus stop at the intersection of Grove and Meadow Streets. I was under the impression that the previous stop had been abandoned due to lack of ridership. This is a relatively narrow residential street with many parked cars. I oppose the new bus stop. End comment. Our next comment is from Una Lochran. And there were a couple of typos in this one, so I will take the liberty to surmise what they meant. To the GRTC board members, I am a resident of Grove Avenue, and the first time I became aware of this route change was the constant bus service this morning, Monday, September 14th, watching the buses speed along the 1400 block of Grove. While the value of a service that connects VCU to U of R is a little unclear to me, I am baffled that you have chosen to route such a heavily scheduled service along an exclusively residential street. Main Street and Broad Street are not far away and are already well-used thoroughfares for cars and buses. And then minimum, we should have had a period of consultation and a leafleting of the neighborhood to let us know of your plans to turn a quiet residential street with numerous stop signs into a bus route. The stop signs are a clear deterrent to through traffic. As a resident of Grove, I strongly oppose the conversion of a quiet street into a busy thoroughfare when it is clear that there are much better alternatives. End comment. Our next comment comes from Chris Berry. Ms. Tim committed to me, to the FDA BOD, which means Board of Directors, and to Kim Gray back in March to hold a meeting for input from Grove Avenue residents about the return of busing to Grove. This was delayed by COVID, but in July, I reminded her of her commitment to do nothing about new routes without hearing from residents. That meeting never happened. And now GRTC has, apparently by fiat, added unnecessary routes. Several years ago, when the studies for Pulse were done, the route that went east on Grove and west on Hanover was declared unnecessary and closed. A wise move, as more often than not, massive buses stopping or passing by the 2000 block of Grove were empty or held only 1 to 2 passengers. Now, against vocalized opposition, we have massive buses going both ways on a congested residential street and consuming 6 parking spots in an area where parking is very difficult. Once again, these unneeded buses are being thrust upon us by a company that is apparently answerable to no one. Enough, we protest. End comment. Our next comment comes from Elizabeth Boyle. Dear GRTC board members, I am a resident of the 1900 block of Grove Avenue. We were shocked last week to come outside to see coming soon signs on both sides of Grove at the intersection of Meadow. We received no communication. I reviewed all the online postings, announcements, and updates, including the new maps of Route 77. These stops are not shown. GRTC has told representatives that a virtual meeting was held July 23rd. Not one resident on my block was notified. It is not City Council's responsibility nor the FDA's, which had no notice as well. It should be GRTC that communicates with residents to allow for public comment and input. Without notice of the route and map, why would any resident have a reason to even look for a GRTC meeting, especially during a pandemic and the unrest? If you had spoken with us, you would hear this is a residential street with a church, preschool, playground, seniors, and small children. Our homes are close to the street and the intersection is already very busy. There are numerous accidents at Meadow and Grove, including cars coming onto sidewalks. Just outside the bus stop is 3 homes with senior citizens and a family with 2 children under 2 years old. The buses will add a considerable amount of noise, fumes, dirt, trash, and traffic. We cannot lose even one parking spot. This is a zoned parking area because there is limited parking and now it is even more compromised. Just this month, Tabernacle Baptist Church created 4 apartments and has up to 4 people per apartment with only off-street space for apartment. Additionally, the church has almost 2/3 of the south side of Grove restricted for church activity parking and a loading zone 7 days a week. If a bus space is added, we will lose a significant portion of the already limited parking. It is not clear why this location was selected. We have no businesses or employers in the surrounding blocks. We do not have apartments or large sections of student housing. There was a bus stop at Tabernacle that was eliminated due to very low numbers. It was my understanding one goal of the Pulse project was to move buses to Broad and off streets. Now they are being added back without any discussion. Does GRTC have supporting data justifying these new stops? We request a community meeting with proper and public notice to discuss these new routes. It is easy to underestimate the significant negative impact adding these stops brings to our block and Grove Avenue. We deserve to be included and have our considerations and concerns given serious attention. End comment. Our next public comment comes from Betsy Caulfield. I understand that there will be a Board of Directors meeting and a portion of the meeting will be feedback from neighbors concerning the new GRTC bus route. I am here to express my opinion. I live in the Fan on Grove Avenue. I have lived in this neighborhood since 1978 and have owned a home on Grove Avenue for almost 20 years. I am past president of the Fan District Association, which is a 3,000 household neighborhood, as well as past president of the Fan Women's Club. I think I have a pretty good feel for my neighborhood and the way it works. I'm absolutely stupefied at how a bus route could have been added to this community and just about no one knew anything about it, including members of the board of the Fan District Association. How could that have happened? How could GRTC not contact those in the community to let them know that buses were going to once again be driving up and down the street in short intervals of time every day of the week, unless of course you didn't want us to know? Who approved this? Who put their seal of approval on it without checking in with the neighbors affected by it? Who does business that way? Who's in charge? The whole thing is preposterous. My understanding of the elimination of the buses 2 years ago was because there weren't enough riders to support it. Now with the pandemic and more people working from home, how could rider participation gotten better? Every bus that's gone past my house today has no one on it. No one. I think it would be in your best interest to start the process over and survey the neighbors, the neighborhood association, and ask them how they feel about this, or at the very least clue them in as to what GRTC is doing. You're starting off on a really bad foot. End comment. There were additional public comments submitted to GRTC in general, which have already been communicated for logging to the planning comment email. I have those as well, and it's at your discretion, Mr. Chair, if you would like me to also read those publicly.
How many are those?
There are 12, sir.
12 more?
Yes, sir.
Anything that you feel that we need to hear that's significantly different from what we've heard?
There's only one that is significantly different from the additional 11. It is from a University of Richmond rider.
That would be helpful.
Okay, this public comment is from Bob Plymail. It's great to hear the U of R, which is the University of Richmond, once again has a 7 days a week GRTC service. I hope the bus line is used to the point where it will run later in the evenings and every 15 minutes. Thank you. End comment.
Thank you. Any board questions or comments on these pieces? Julie, would you describe briefly the public process that we went through here and what has or has not been done there?
Absolutely. So this particular route has been a top priority for GRTC since the development of our transit plan 2 years ago. It was removed during the planning process for the redesign, but put as one of the 2 top routes to be put back in place when funding was available. So there was limited funding for, and that was one of the reasons why it was not put in place. It did create a service gap. Over a year ago, the planning department of GRTC, along with the planning department and the public works in the city of Richmond, coordinated together on the route changes as well as the stop placement, reviewed the different places where it would be reasonable to place stops for access on public rights of way. Those places were identified and a public meeting was held in the March timeframe along with a survey, and notification was provided to the fan district as well as residents at that time. We did receive some comments that they did not want to have a bus stop pairing at Grove and Strawberry. Part of the response to that was reconsideration and having a pairing at Grove and Meadow, which is a larger intersection for more room for accessibility. We did commit to having more conversations. That was in March, and of course, as we all know, in March, COVID happened. The coordination was put on hold until we can get back, with the understanding that GRTC was planning to delay implementation of this route until September, and so there would be plenty of time for that coordination. No other requests for coordination happened. I understand that everyone got tied up with COVID and with the protests. So if there was an oversight in getting additional notice to the public, I acknowledge that across the board, that it's very hard to get notice to people, especially under COVID conditions. However, we did put out notice on social media. We put out the press releases. We put out notices on our buses. And we put out notices wherever we could with the press itself that we were reopening the public comment period in July. We had a public comment period meeting in July on the topic. And this also came before the board on 3 times in March, I believe July and August of this year to go through the process. It has been approved by the city of Richmond. We can't put out bus stops without the approval of the city of Richmond. And with all of those approvals and that multi-year public process in place, we did advance this project. And whether or not we have data to warrant this, it has been suggested that, of course, with the multifamily housing being in place, with the senior citizens in the area, with the limited parking, and with the geographic gap in density of this area, that it is an area that would likely see a good use of transit. And we recommend that we continue to move forward with this route and review the ridership, review the stop ridership, and see exactly how it's performing over the course of the year. I also recommend that we also have a meeting with the people who are complaining about this, about the impacts to their neighborhood, to give them a fair hearing and to see whether or not there are any adjustments that can be made to how the stop is placed, how we're reporting back to them, so that they do understand that this is a fair use of public space and public right-of-way.
Thank you. Other comments? Eldridge, do you have any idea how, I mean, when I came to Richmond in 1970, we had a Grove Avenue bus. I know we lost it there during the route consolidation a couple of years ago, but it was there forever. Was it? We've had it for a long time, right? Are you there, Eldridge? You're muted. Okay. Anybody else know? I think it's been there forever.
We have that the route, Mr. Chairman, has been there for some time. I believe when I talked with staff about it, that it's come and gone several times due to a lack of funding, and that when you do have a route that has inconsistent performance, that it's there and then it's not there and then it's there, you do tend to lose ridership, and the ridership is slow to return because we haven't had the route.
Sorry.
Please, sorry.
Was this route east on Grove and west on Hanover at one point?
I would have to ask Carrie or Adrian if they have more information about the history of this route.
Okay, so one of your correspondents alleged that, and I can't remember. All right, any further questions on this? Thank you. I think if there's not, we will move on. And those who gave public comment, thank you for that. And I understand that we're going to make some form of meeting available to residents of the neighborhood. We'll notify the associations and so on, so we can proceed further on this. And we will monitor the usage of this route, which is helpful. So the minutes, do you have the minutes? Does anybody have any additions or corrections to them? All right, could I have a motion to approve the minutes, please, from August?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. We're going to move on now to Ms. Torres on CVTA update. I do not hear you.
Is that better?
Much
Okay.
better, right?
Sometimes it glitches. I have to turn it off and on.
Yeah,
All right. Good morning. CVT update.
good morning.
All right. So the Central Virginia Transportation Authority had its first meeting on August 27th. This meeting was held in person at the Greater Richmond Convention Center, and there was also a virtual attendance option. It was a very well-attended meeting. Some of the meeting actions, there was the acceptance of the bylaws. This was passed with 2 changes. The guidance documents, these were passed. There was the election of the CVTA officers. The chair was Frank Thornton, the Board of Supervisors, Henrico. The vice chair, Kevin Carroll, Board of Supervisors from Chesterfield. And then there was establishment of the committees. The Finance Committee has its first meeting set for September 18th. And this is going to be at Plan RBA, as well as, I believe, a virtual attendance option. The chair of that committee is Mayor Stoney from the City of Richmond, and the vice chair is Canova Peterson, Board of Supervisors from Hanover. The CVTA TAC was also established, and their first meeting is set for September 21st. The next meeting for the actual CVTA member body is still being coordinated. And some future CVTA actions that they laid out at that first meeting is that they will be future adopting the budget. They will be reviewing and reporting on the transit governance structure, and that is set for December 1st. The establishment of the regional project prioritization process is still being worked out. And then related to GRTC, the development of the regional public transportation plan. We did have our first kickoff meeting, and that was held on August 24th, and we're still coordinating our next meeting, but some actions that have happened in between. We've drafted the scope of work. We are going to get the support of a consultant to help us do the development. This will help with some reviewing some trends, current plans, and developing some alternatives, as well as looking at revenue analysis projections, cost allocation alternatives, and of course, looking at this in light of what's happened with COVID. The final plan will come to the board for approval once it is complete. This plan then will eventually be adopted by CVTA. We are recommending for the development of the plan and using consultants to be using some of the transit funds, the 15% of the 2020. And the estimate for the consultant services is under $150,000. Again, some other steps that are going to be addressed by CVTA is they'll make staffing decisions, they'll distribute the payments to localities, including GRTC, as well as audit. So when I'm coming to you, this is actually an action item. I don't know if I should bring it back up later or.
Why don't you tell us what it is, Adrian, and then we'll have a little conversation about it.
Okay, this is in regards to the consultant support services to approve us using or making the recommendation to use the CVTA transit funds for the consultant services.
So in order to get the transit plan that we are responsible to provide to CVTA, we need a consultant to do the detailed work, much of which an outline has already been done. And
Yeah, I say more of facilitation and compilation is what, we have a lot of plans that we've already done the legwork on, whether it's our TDP, Phase 2 regional vision plan, the vision plan itself, and then the jurisdictions, they have their master plans, which also address transit. So helping us do that, but then all the revenue sources, looking at the different cost allocation models that we have, as well as looking at the new revenue source from the dedicated transit funds. And then, we have different resource as far as operators and vehicles. So helping us determine how we can phase in this hopefully enhanced service with the resources that we have and adding to them in the future. So there's a decent amount of work to be done, but it would be great to have some support for GRTC as we do the development.
so let's get a motion on the table if we could from a board member. What we're looking for is authorization to request from the CVTA. They have to give us approval as well. The authority to spend up 100. Do we have an amount we put on it?
The estimate is about $150,000.
So about $150,000 for a consultant to do the detailed preparation of the proposed plan for extension of service through CVTA funds. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So move.
This is a second, okay. Conversation, questions? Adrian, when you say we are doing this, you're talking about the Technical Advisory Committee, correct? Is that what they call it? Or,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we have the working group with
Working group.
the MPO.
It's working group for the MPO.
Correct.
Okay.
Can we
any-
say a maximum of $150,000 with our approval?
Will that work for you, Adrian?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Was it your motion, Gary?
It was my motion.
Is that okay with you, Denny?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any further conversation or question about this? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's passed. Thank you, Ms. Torres.
Thank you.
Next is a report on fair policy considerations. Have fun, Adrian.
I will try my best.
Yeah.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, can you see the PowerPoint?
I can.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so fair policy considerations. This is bringing back a topic that we started discussing last fall. And just wanted to bring it back around as the timing just kind of seems relevant, as we've been using COVID funds, care funds, to basically cover the revenue source we normally get from fairs since we discontinued fairs during this pandemic time. As we've been going through this though, and people have been returning to work, the campuses are coming back to some level. We've had increased capacity on a lot of our buses now, and that's probably only going to grow. With other agencies who've had free fares, you see a decent % increase in ridership even without a pandemic. Sorry. Other agencies, they've all done different things. Some have already reinstated fares for various reasons. It could be that they're back to from a state of emergency, gone down a level, or capacity issues as well, or just had to go back to a sense of normalcy. And then we also have CVTA, which is new for us. A lot of changes will be coming. So it's just another added variable as far as things that are addressed at GRTC. So this particular table is just to show our various revenue sources. And these are projections that were done for FY22 to look at funds that will be coming in. And you'll see the one there for Farebox. It uses FY19 ridership kind of as the base for the estimate. And then it also includes some enhanced services that we had already gone over as potentials for FY22, which is the need for the increased vehicles and increased operators. But with all that together, it's about $8.4 million for revenue related to Farebox. Oops. As far as alternative considerations, these are the few that we discussed back in the fall. The first one is our current fare structure, keeping that in place, our current day pass, 7-day pass, and 30-day pass, the various passes that we have already. And it could include some technology changes that we go through as far as enhancements and adding to it, or doing some policy changes to the current fare structure. But in all, it would stay the same. Next would be zero fare is also something that's considered. In other agencies, they're having similar conversations for the same reasons. And they say that a lot of it, that with zero fare, that ridership does increase within the first year. And then alternative 3, account-based fares, that's the one we went over in a little bit more detail back in the fall, which includes some fare capping and would allow us to use smart cards to be able to have reloadable cards. A little bit of background on who are our riders. And this just shows as far as a lot of our riders are low income. The bullet point you see there, about 54% of GRTC's riders report an annual household income below $25,000. And this is important because that's not just true of our system non-pandemic times, but you'll see that we truly are an essential transit system. And with that particular, that GRTC, that low income riders and all other riders as well, we're still using our service during those times. So you've seen this map before from Julie, but it shows our kind of our COVID peak capacities at PM peak. And then it goes over and you'll see the similar demographic to kind of our economically distressed areas. And a few more variables on fare use by low income riders. And this looks more at the actual passes. So one ride and cash and the day pass are the primary fare types used by riders with income below $25,000. The bus is the primary fare outlet for riders with income below $25,000. The majority of riders with income below $25,000 have identified current fares as reasonable and would not support any increase. And the majority of GRTC riders have identified having a smartphone. That last bullet point really kind of gets at the any technology changes. If we do go towards like an account-based system, it's the majority, I think it was over 85%, did have smartphones, so would be able to use a smart card as well as reloadable. Now this gets into kind of some different discussion alternative topics and comparing the different alternatives. So I have alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 3 laid out in this table. And this one is about revenue. So annual fare box revenue today is $5.7 million. And adding in annual pass revenue from the government, so that's kind of our SWIPE program, which is still fare box, is about $390,000. Annual pass revenue that we get from VCU is $1.3 million. And then what we get for care service is $686,000. And then a mixture between city, state, and other subsidies is roughly $33.3 million. So all in all, $41.4 million in just these listed variables. And moving to a zero fare system, you'll see the same 41.4 that we still need to operate. But the first 3 are empty because that's our fare box. We leave at VCU still at 1.1. Their structure would be a little bit different, and these are just things that we're been thinking about, necessarily had any conversations. But that would be for operating for the increased pulse service that currently is in existence, as well as considerations for the Route 5, because we would most likely capacities would increase and the request for Route 5 frequencies would probably be something that would be considered. So again, 1.1 is what we consider from VCU. And then that meant that there has to be an increase somewhere to still get the 41.4. So this would have to come from one of the other revenue sources from jurisdictions or the state, or it could even be conversations about the funds that we may be receiving from CBTA. All of it would be in conversation as far as where the amount for the gap for fare box would come from. And then alternative 3, account-based fare system. And this is very similar to what we have today in our fare structure. All the same boxes are filled. It just would be a different way for customers to interact. So this is administrative cost. Not much a difference in terms of the total net at the bottom. They both are about, all of them are about 1.3. The main thing with this is that even though staffing would change as far as people's roles, we aren't necessarily going to not keep our staff. They would just have different responsibilities if we move towards a zero fare system or account-based fare systems. But you do see things that we no longer would need, for example, money room security. We no longer would need an armored vehicle. The TVMs would no longer be in existence, so we would no longer need some cash servicing. I did kind of put that catch-all at the bottom for some staff reassignment. Next is technology, exactly the same for what would be the current system as well as the account-based fare systems with the software annual cost. There would be some initial development costs to just start the account-based fare system, which is roughly $300,000. Facility space needs, we don't anticipate any changes for that. The TVMs, the only change with this one would be zero fare system. Of course, they would no longer be needed, but we need to do further exploration because they have not reached their useful life. So we would have to figure out what steps would be needed to be done for resale. The fare boxes, this would be the same thing as the TVMs. We need to do further exploration in order to do resale. And then we would need a tap on, tap off. This would be a new fare structure that could be used for either our current fare system or our account-based fare system. And this would require additional marketing, and then for the account-based would require additional programming. Some finance policy discussion topics would be the simplification of the fare structure. We don't anticipate this with our current system, but it could be something that we decide. We could make some changes to that on the policy level. This, of course, would be not applicable for the zero fare system. This would be something we would do for the account-based fares, and as far as changes, as far as costs, it would be new fare structure, some marketing, and some programming. The exact same thing if we did fare capping would require fare structure changes, marketing, and programming. We have cost of accounts. This would be relevant for just the account-based fare system, getting those accounts set up in a system. We are not sure exactly what that cost would be at this time. And then recognition of past revenue and stored value. We do not anticipate any changes as far as amount of revenue that we would receive between our current system and our account-based system. But if we did make a policy decision to recognize that revenue kind of as you go, as the customers are using their passes, opposed to our current system, whereas the vendors or customers buy the passes, that revenue gets marked on our books at that point in time. So it would just be delayed. And then increase in fares, this would be a policy decision for either of the fare systems. Next is business communication, marketing cost. No changes for the current fare system, but with zero fares would still require a decent amount of marketing. So we have this at $300,000. And then for alternative 3 with the account-based fares, we're putting that at $500,000. If there are no changes in the actual fares though, just the technological changes, it would be the same as the zero fare at $300,000. The pass card distribution of the business outlets, we wouldn't make any changes to the current system today, but as things change with the account-based fare systems, we would, since the buses no longer would be the main outlet, which we saw with, especially with low-income riders, that they use the bus for purchasing passes, we would have to increase the vendor locations. And this could be adding additional TVMs at different places within our system, as well as being strategic in adding vendor locations and maybe some sort of incentive for vendors to actually hold our passes. The cost of cards and the cost sharing, these new cards for the account-based system would be $1.50. Low income cards conversation we've also had as a different option of fare media. This would be probably a cost sharing with the jurisdictions, whether it's our current system or the account-based fare systems, to have an added subsidy. And then shared use cards. This is applicable to the account-based fare systems, and this could debit master accounts and do cost sharing for one household. Kind of a parent has a card as well as they want their children to be able to be on the same account to manage it. As far as operations, for zero fare as well as the account-based fare, we do see an increase in route efficiency for time needed to collect fares, With the zero fare system, we would of course have both doors open as we do on the Pulse. We just would walk on. And there would be some level of increase we are projecting for account-based fare system. And this would come from just less interaction required for the operator to buy fare media. Route efficiency, I just mentioned this above, an increase with the zero fare system with the dual boarding. Fare enforcement, if we did continue our current fare structure or move to account-based, we would have some level of fare enforcement. They would have increased wages though. What that is to be determined. Agency coordination is something that would be very important for zero fare system. It would be coordination with social services, RPD, as well as many others. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to probably be an increase in ridership if you have zero fare system. And just looking at some of the case studies from other agencies who went down this path, they did see an increase and just more people riding the bus who aren't necessarily, they call them non-destination riders, I guess is a good term. And then even an account-based fare system, we'd have to work with social services and others to get things set up on the account-based fare system, just some help. And then for operator training, this is something we'll continue to do across the board, but would need an added operator training for zero fare system, or sensitivity training, as well as increase in capacity and how to deal with those issues. And then for account-based fare system would be for training related to the new fare media interaction. And with all of this, there will be also some social and economic impacts. So as far as local and regional economy, for the zero fare system, that's the main one that's impacted. We would see hopefully an increase in mobility and increased spending power and job access. So this would be no longer a barrier to access, would be, let's say you're working in short pump and need to get further out. This would now wouldn't be an inhibition. Distressed communities, financial benefit for increased mobility, for zero fare, household finance, this would be money back, hopefully, that they could spend on other things. Transit ridership, I mentioned a % increase. Looking at other agencies, they mentioned that you see a 20 to 40% increase in the first year. I did mention there would be a revenue gap within the beginning, but the way that our revenue works in terms of federal formula funding, that there is I'm going to call it delayed revenue. So in the future, we would see revenue come back to us, and if ridership does increase to this level, we would see a decent amount. And then as far as the transit system itself, those agencies that did see the increase in ridership did also said that they had to increase frequency as well as add other resources, operators and vehicles, because capacity then became something that needed to be addressed. So that's something we would have to keep on the radar. And that is it as far as discussion items related to fare policy. Any questions?
How about that? Folks want to say anything about this? Questions about it?
Just want to thank you for breaking it down so well, and something that from 1,000-yard view, all looks so different. Being able to see how it would affect us as a transit company going forward. I have my own feeling about this, and the thing that really pops out to me is that it almost seems that with asking for fares, we're charging people for less efficient service. Sort of interesting how that how that works out. I just want to put my cards on the table as we begin to consider this. Is that in a season of social change and racial and economic cries for racial and economic justice, it seems to me that we should be moving 100% towards a fare-free system. The fares to me are essentially a regressive tax on lower economic people, even though we understand there is a subsidy. The need for transportation and the impact of the cost that people face in order to get to jobs and now where the good paying jobs are going, it's just very, very important. I mean, this is, if there's any time that something like this can be done to move us towards that economic justice, to me, this is that time. Obviously, it requires a lot of agreement from our partners, our owners, the owners of the GRTC. But it also seems that if we were to do this, if we were to increase the ridership, then there's the potential to have more funds from state and federal sources, and ultimately, balance out that gap and be less dependent upon local sources. But everything happens at a particular time for a reason. This had come up, 2 years ago. I don't know if I would have felt this way. I'll be the first to say that. But at a time where we are seeing people putting emphasis and really going the extra yard to make things more, I think we're in that time now, and I would hope that as we discuss this, my colleagues would consider the time and everything that we're in right now and move towards that. Sorry about the soapboxing, but this one just hits home.
Thank you, George. Other comments? What happens in the fact that impresses me that that really stunning, frankly, is that the things that we have to reduce fares, such as weekly, monthly passes, are not primarily being used by the people who need the reduction the most. So I'm looking at both the free service and the fare capping systems as ways of at least addressing that. What happens under the fare capping? I mean, whatever you call that system, the card system,
The
account-based
fares?
system. What happens there for somebody who just gets on the bus and doesn't have anything? Can you pay cash?
I doubt that we would ever get to a point where we're cash free anytime soon. I don't know that our community is ready for that kind of a move. We would still have a cash system, but we would look at policies that would incentivize people to get a card that either has stored value or tied to an account to help them transition away from cash into that stored value or that account-based card. The more we can get people, if we do that system, the more we get people onto that tap and go, the more we can build efficiencies into the operations with that system.
Thank you.
And Mr. Campbell, just to add to that, once they receive that card in a fare capping service, they will be able to, because there may be people out there that don't have access to their account online for whatever reason, to load with a credit card, for example. So not only will they be able to reload those cards at the TBM, but they will also be able to add that money to those cards right at the fare box with cash. So, where you were speaking that they may not have access to our current weekly or monthly passes with that system, even those folks will still receive that capping benefit by adding a little bit of money at a time to their card, but they would still be able to receive the benefit.
My interest is partly because I go to other cities and try to ride public transit, and you get on the bus and they tell you can't get on because you don't have any ability to get on. That's not helpful. And I'm interested in the growth of the transit system and the growth of the use of it. So you always have to ask what happens. What is the barrier to first time use or occasional use? The reason I asked the question as well about the fare is that as we do our projections, we abolish the money room, and you can't do that if you got cash.
No, we would under the case of account-based fares in that system, we would still have the expenses of the money room, the efficiencies, the economic efficiencies that come with zero fare. We would not realize under account-based fare system. There are definitely pros and cons to every one of these three scenarios. It's a very complex issue. We can boil down some of the high-level issues and some of the key points, but we wanted to make sure that we introduce this topic now. So as we start developing our FY22 budget and projections and revenue sources, we have an idea for what those expenses and investment strategies should be, because all of these are different investment strategies with different returns. And we want to make sure that we don't put money or change our revenue streams without really having full consideration of the impact to the community and to the business.
Thank you. Further comments and questions? Well, thank you so much for that excellent rundown of our options as we go forward. And if that's all that people have to say, we'll go on now to Mr. Barham and operating performance. Tim.
Yes. Thank you, Reverend Campbell, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Starting with the overview of the KPIs, we finished August at 66.90%, a little less than this past in July. We're continuing to, the service, identify problem areas and routes. And just give you an example, routes 1A, B, and C has been one of our worst underperforming routes in terms of OTP. So we have looked at making adjustments, which went into effect on the 13th. So as we continue to move forward, we'll make adjustments as we continue to monitor service. Loss was at 1,075. It did go up from July, which was at 857. And
excuse me, Tim, excuse me just a minute. Rob,
yes,
are other people having sound go in and out on them? Or is that just me?
Sounds clear to me, sir.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going over the lost time absenteeism rate is at 16%, up from 12% in July. That is attributed to a couple of things, higher number of vacations in August, but the bigger factor was we had 3 positive cases this past month of COVID, and with the quarantine and the contact tracing scenarios resulted in a significant amount of our operators who weren't available for periods of time. And as we continue to go through these ebbs and flows of the pandemic, we're going to continue to, unfortunately, go through these service disruptions. We will always, go with the health of our operators as our top priority. So, we're as cautious as we can when it comes to these issues, and make sure that we're taking proper precautions, following CDC guidelines and following with the state in terms of how we handle these quarantine scenarios. You may have heard about one of our operators in particular who's battling the virus, Operator John Brewer. Our thoughts and prayers go out to him, his family, as he continues to go through this ordeal. And on a non-COVID related note, I just wanted to also mention about the passing of one of the mechanics, Ernest Loving, passed away a few weeks ago. And it has been a significant loss to not only GRTC's family, but his own family as well. His service was this past Friday. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the Loving family on the loss of Ernie. Back to the KPIs, we had for this past month customer complaints 1.41 per 10,000 rides, which was a little up from July, which was at 1.24. The FIS report, continuing the same downward trend compared to last year at this time. So just to give you real briefly, the August numbers compared to August of last year, local fixed route service was down just under 12%, 43%. Commuter service continues to be around 90% down, and combined fixed route service down around 22.91%. Care service down around 36%, 30% down in care on demand, So the overall service from August compared to last year was 23%, and compared to this fiscal year so far, we're down about 21.5%. Just to give you some ridership numbers over the last 3 months, this past summer, we had 582,182 customers rode service in June. July, that number was at 641,280, and August 640,727. So it's been steady the last few months, but as Adrian mentioned earlier, we continue to see a steady incline in the service as we go forward. Route 111, continue to monitor that service as well. For average weekday, we were at 112, and for Saturday at 110. Just a reminder, our target numbers were originally 140 and 70, so still a little more people riding on Saturday versus what was expected. For our care service, the OTP still holding steady at 92%, and complaints did go up somewhat. We had 12 for the month, 7.23 per 10,000 rides, but we did have 5 accommodations for the month as well. COVID-19 and maintenance initiatives. This past month, we went a little further step in terms of the no mask, no ride rule, so that if there is a customer who is riding or attempts to ride without a mask, they will be asked to put some mask or face covering on. We have a supply of masks that we can give to customers if need be, but if the customer doesn't comply, the operator will stop the bus, call it in, and we'll address it accordingly. From a staffing standpoint, we're at 273 full-time, 18 part-time operators, a little down as we've had in past months. And the reason being is because we've had a few retirements, resignations, and we actually had 3 operators this past month to be promoted to supervisors. 2 of them started yesterday, in fact. We'll continue to recruit, hire, train. We had 3 operators graduate this past Friday on our revenue service. We have 5 operators that are in training now that are projected to graduate sometime around mid to late October. And we're also looking at recruiting and hiring mechanics as well. I believe we're about 3 short as far as mechanics go. And we start our commercial shoots this week. Today, in fact, we have our first round of commercial shoots. So hopefully you'll see those on the airways here in the next few months. And that is it for the operations report. Any questions?
Tim, give us the names of the man who's in the hospital with COVID, the driver, and the gentleman who passed, the mechanic who died.
Yes, sir. The operator's name is Thrower.
That's John.
John Thrower.
Yeah.
And the mechanic who passed, non-COVID related, name is Ernest Loving III.
Right, and Ernest was from a family that had worked here.
Yes, his father was a longtime mechanic, retired several years ago. And he was here for 21 years, 21-year veteran of the company.
So would somebody give me a motion to express our love and concern to the family of Mr. Loving and our prayers and concern for John Thrower?
So move.
So move.
All right, so everybody, all in favor say aye.
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 Yeah, please
Aye.
pray for John and for Ernest's family. And this GRTC is a significant family of people, and John in particular. We're praying that he comes through this now. Thank you for that. Our next safety performance. Thanks for that, Tim. Is Tony. Here we are.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Starting off with the month of August, was an increase in numbers so far as accidents. We had 18 preventable accidents in August. In July, we had 8. In August, so far as non-preventable accidents, there were 25. In July, it was 26. Miles between preventable accidents driven 26,141 in August, 58,017 in the month of July. The total number of accidents was 43 in August, 34 in July. So as you can see, there was an increase in the numbers. A lot of this can be a contribute to the amount of accidents that we had with other vehicles. In August, we had 20 accidents. July, we had 14. And basically what we're looking at insofar as doing the actual trend analysis, really not seeing one type of accident. What we're seeing is a lot of the accidents are just based off of making bad decisions. A lot of the vehicles involved in the accidents with buses are making bad decisions. And we've had some situations where our operators didn't make quite the best decisions. What we're doing is we're taking it to the street. And I know I've said this in previous meetings, but we're really getting out there and trying to be seen. We're trying to interact with operators to let them know, you know, we're there for them. We're trying to do everything we possibly can, but they have to take it upon themselves as well to use those techniques that they receive in training, and to use those techniques that we go over to keep themselves and everybody else as well. Another thing that we're trying to do, and Julie's always talking about being innovative and coming up with ways to reach out to the operators and ways to reach. We started our virtual training process. We talked about this a couple months ago, and really COVID took over. It was initially set up so that we could do refresher trainings and reach out to the operators so they wouldn't have to actually come into the building. Of course, when COVID came up, that took precedent, and we were able to train 100, well, not 100%, but I think we were right at 98% of all GRTC employees over virtual training, which is something that we really started. A lot of the operators, you know, they were a little hesitant about using the computer, but they were able to come into the human resources office and come into the training department, and we sat down with them, and they were pleased with the actual training, learned a lot, and it was a total success. So what we're trying to do is the training department, along with transportation, we're coming up with a program where we're going to reach out to the operators and do a virtual training, more of a refresher type training, just to go over those techniques and use those ideas, like I said, to remind people. We have no doubt that the operators here are doing the best they possibly can, but dealing with a lot of stuff. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we remind them of those techniques so they can keep that in mind. Like I said, we've been out in the streets with the actual operators, and we're getting great reception from them. They like to see us. We talk about certain things, any ideas, any comments, any things that they have. And we're incorporating that into our SMS plan. And a lot of the information that we're getting from them, we use that track data and do risk analysis so that we can prevent those certain locations and those certain things that will create those hazards. So hopefully coming in the future, we'll see a real change in these type of numbers that we're seeing, but we're working towards interacting more with the operators and not having them come to the actual building so that they can get that information. We're taking it to them and giving them their feedback and getting the feedback while they're actually out on the street. So it allows us to interact with the operators on a more significant basis. Other than that, that's the safety report. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I think that does it for the safety report. Isn't it nice that you don't have to do the report on the fair policing that we were doing?
It's always a pleasure.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to Title VI, for which we're going to need board approval. Who has got this? Hi, Emily. Thank you. And Patricia.
My name
right?
is Emily Daniel, and myself and Patricia Robinson from the Planning Department will be presenting on Title VI this morning. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. So just to give you an idea of some of the topics we'll be going over today, we'll be talking about some of the Title VI requirements, what our existing policies are, as well as some of the data analysis and the ridership surveys that we've conducted. So this presentation is really just intended to be an overview of our Title VI program and a refresher for you. And while some of the policies and analysis can be pretty dense, we're going to try to stay, not get too far into the weeds on anything. But we do want to make sure that we give the board enough information because, as Mr. Chairman said, this will require board action in approving our Title VI program so that we can then go ahead and send it on to FDA for final approval, which for us is due in October. So getting into what is required in Title VI. Title VI is actually a result of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it's aimed at preventing discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in any federally funded program. And some of the requirements of the program from FTA are that we define what a major service change is, and that we ensure that changes are fair for all of our customers. It also requires that we set some thresholds for how much a change to service can affect certain populations. So those populations include minority, low income, and also limited English proficiency or LEP populations. And this is required to be updated every 3 years. Now, because of GRTC's size, the number of vehicles that we operate, and also that we're in an urbanized area, we're actually required to go one step further with our Title VI and do something that's called a level and quality of service analysis. So this is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's aimed at monitoring the level and quality of service that GRTC provides through a civil rights equity lens. So the FTA kind of sets some factors that agencies should be looking at, but then it's up to each transit agency to actually define those standards. So many of our standards come from our TDP, and this analysis also includes an onboard survey. And just like our Title VI program, it's supposed to be in conjunction with the Title VI update done every 3 years. So this level and quality of survey analysis is actually a really nice place to start with Title VI update because it does give a snapshot for really how equitable GRTC's service is based on the standards that we defined. So what's on your screen now are the 11 standards that we use in this analysis. And as you can see, there are 3 that are highlighted in yellow. These 3 showed disparities of more than our 20% threshold for either minority or LEP, limited English proficiency population. So while we do recognize that these are flagged as being areas of concern, through further analysis, we were actually able to understand a little bit better why these concerns may have been raised and why the disparity may actually exist. And we found some factors may actually be out of our control. So just as an example, with vehicle headway. So as you know, our system is defined or is designed in such a way that denser areas or areas with greater population receive greater service because they have higher demand for service. And what we found through this analysis is that actually our LEP, our limited English proficiency population, tends to be concentrated in more rural areas. And those rural areas, because they have a less dense population, they have less demand for ridership, they actually receive less frequency. So you can kind of see why that disparity may exist there. Similarly, with our bus stop spacing policy, we do follow industry kind of standards there where it encourages further distance between stops in rural areas for the same reason that I already mentioned, that the population density is lesser there, so there's less demand for ridership. And as I said, we found that our LEP population is concentrated in those rural areas. So again, you can see why there would be a disparity there with our bus stop spacing. And finally, you see on-time performance highlighted. And what we found was that there were concerns raised from our LEP population regarding on-time adherence in our onboard survey. But once we did our analysis using the data, we actually found that no Title VI concern was raised in that area. So that is something that we will, of course, continue to closely monitor as we move forward.
Mr. Braxton.
Emily? Yeah, thank you. Can you define rural for me in terms of how you're using it here? What,
Sure.
what's considered a rural area?
It's based on population density. So as I said, it's going to be less than something. Let me go back to that slide. 200,000 or more residents is considered urban. So I don't have the number right off the top of my head for what rural is, but it's just based on population density.
So it's sort of it's just I guess just two choices. It's urban and rural. So suburban could be rural based on this definition. What we would normally consider suburban. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around, because we're not taking, service out, deep into the heart of Haydenville. So I'm just trying. So we're really talking about parts of the county.
Yes,
And that where they had targets and stuff like that. Okay. Got it.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just
Okay.
talking about less population density here.
Okay. I just wanted clarity for myself and whoever else may have a picture of what.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. So with all of these 11 survey or standards, we have included detailed analysis of what we have done to calculate each of them. That's in our level and quality of service analysis section in the program update. So for any more information or detailed analysis, you can go there to find more detailed descriptions in our methodology. And with all of these, including the standards that are highlighted, we will continue to closely monitor these and address concerns through future service changes when possible. So kind of getting into what our existing Title VI policy includes. As I mentioned, the FTA requires that we define what a major service change is. So we use these 9 categories that you see on your screen and their accompanying thresholds to define what a major service change is. So anytime we're making a service change, we're using these categories and their thresholds to determine if it's considered major or not. If it is considered major, then further analysis is required before we're able to go ahead and make the change. And one way that we analyze these major service changes is through our disproportionate burden policy. So we use this to analyze the change and ensure that the change is fair for our low-income riders. So the policy considers a service change unfair if it impacts the low-income population by 20 percentage points more or less than the change impacts the population of the entire service area. Similarly, we also use our disparate impact policy to make sure that changes are fair to our minority riders. So this policy considers a service change unfair if it impacts the minority population by 20 percentage points more or less than the change impacts the population of the entire service area.
So Emily, it's going to impact these two groups more or less in every case. So do you mean that it's really about impacting them more, isn't it?
This is really, this part is a little tricky, the wording of it, but basically we're providing a threshold or a window where we're saying we don't want either our minority populations or our low income populations to be impacted by 20 percentage points more than the entire population.
Okay.
So we don't want those populations affected any more or less dramatically than the rest of the population as a whole. That's kind of just a simple way to think of it.
Okay.
So actually in this area, since our last program update, we did receive a Title VI complaint regarding our disparate impact policy. So FDA did review that complaint and they did determine that GRTC did not violate our Title VI policy. However, they did request that we explain our methodology in greater detail. So without getting too much into the weeds, just to kind of give you an overview of what that methodology includes, we use something, a metric called people trips. So it's kind of just what the name sounds like. We're looking at both the people or the population of the area and the trips or the amount of service that goes through that area. So this is kind of a beneficial metric to use because it's more sensitive than just taking into account just the census information or just the land use. It actually considers the population and the amount of service that that population is receiving instead of just one or the other. So we do plan to continue using this metric going forward. And all of this detailed methodology is included in our program update in great detail. So you can look there for more information as well. And now I will go ahead and hand it over to Tricia, who will continue with our LEP policy.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, this is our LEP, or Limited English Proficiency Policy. This plan determines which languages we must translate GRTC vital documents into. The change here from the last program update is that we will only be translating for Spanish. Based on the thresholds, we were actually never required to translate into Vietnamese or Arabic, so moving forward, we'll continue with just Spanish. Next slide. The public outreach process states that notification of changes will be made via public meetings with an option for virtual, GRTC website, notification at bus stops and transfer locations, as well as online surveys. This is a change in the last program update to no longer include flyers on buses for every booking change, just because it is difficult to keep up with resource-wise. I do want to note that removing the flyers from the policy doesn't mean we'll no longer use them, it just provides us with more flexibility. For our Title VI survey, with our public outreach process in mind, we created a policy survey to get feedback on service change metrics, disproportionate and disparate impact thresholds, and our existing policies. The planning department was only able to distribute hard copies of the survey on 2 dates at the beginning of March before COVID restrictions took place. We did have a fairly large collection period, and the online survey was available throughout that entire collection period, as well as we did hold a public meeting in August virtually. We had 154 responses this time around. This is an increase from last time we did this update. We only had about 84 survey responses. The increase is likely attributed to marketing department use of low-cost Facebook ads, which linked people in our service area directly to the survey. For the detailed results of the survey and comments we received, they can be viewed in the final program update. Overall, 93% of respondents felt neutral or satisfied by the draft Title VI policy. Amongst the 7% of respondents that were not satisfied with the policy, they expressed a common theme of confusion in the open comments section and provided that the open comment section that we provided, and noted that they did not want to see any service changes be made to the system. So with all that being said, the GRTC staff recommends that the Board of Directors approves the Title VI program update for 2020. After board approval, the planning staff will submit the updated program to FTA by October 1st.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I found that a very helpful presentation. Are there questions or comments? Could I have a motion to approve GRTC's Title VI policy update?
So moved.
It's been moved, and I heard a second, or I had two moves, that we approve the GRTC Title VI program update as presented. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
All opposed? No, it is passed. There are none opposed, and thank you so much, Ms. Del Ross and Robinson. That was really very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, operator recruitment media buy, Carrie Rose Pace. Hello.
Hello again. GRTC's Board of Directors approved the marketing operating budget for fiscal year 21, which included a minimum of $200,000 to spend on operator recruitment advertising, plus an additional $133,000 to spend on other GRTC marketing efforts. After internal discussions of company needs in fiscal year 21, we believe it is necessary to allocate most of this funding for operator recruitment and include new production shots showing COVID-19 realities and safety measures. Separately, the approved budget includes up to $19,000 for production of fiscal year 21 updates to the campaign materials. We are shooting new footage showcasing COVID-19 safety measures, such as masks, electrostatic spray cleaning, current zero fare, social distance, and other important safety shots. Today is actually our first production day, and we hope to complete filming this week. We will incorporate the new production materials into existing campaign materials to maintain a consistent presentation. Additionally, we will include 2 new operator stories into the series. Updated messaging will highlight safety, job security, employee benefits, and customer service skills. At this time, we are only bringing forward the plans for the fall 2020 media buy run using part of our total fiscal year 21 budget for operator recruitment. As you are all familiar with our recent media buys, these partners provide a balance of on-air and digital advertising placements. What is new to this run, though, that I want to highlight for you is that we are expanding the reach of our digital advertising to include more of the Commonwealth, potentially competing with other transit markets for talent. We are also scheduling more mobile app advertisements and more streaming, as many of us have been using these resources increasingly in 2020 during the pandemic. Because of the uncertainty of fall sports, both collegiate and professional, we will be able to reallocate any future canceled events for other make good placement in prime or news. GRTC obtained media buy proposals from the following media partners, where we will issue not to exceed purchase orders in the following amounts. With CBS 6, $55,000, NBC 12, $50,000, Fox 25,000 for our total fall spend of $130,000. Our recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the purchase order specified in not to exceed amounts for each media partner in fall 2020.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? Could I have a motion to approve this expenditure, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this this media buy as proposed by Ms. Rose Pace. Are there any further comments or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, get your friends and neighbors to apply to be bus drivers. We need them. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Mr.
lot,
Chair.
Carrie. Okay. Oh, this is exciting. Tanya, we got a record purchase?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. GRTC's maintenance department currently has 2 heavy-duty records available to tow all of its fleet vehicles in need of repair. One of the wreckers is a 1991 Ford and has reached the end of its useful life. Staff issued an RFP to initiate the purchase of a new wrecker. 2 companies responded, and staff determined that Western Star Trucks of Delmarva submitted the highest ranked proposal. Although both Western Star Trucks and Matheny Motor Truck Company, although their pricing for the wrecker is nearly the same, Western Star Trucks provided more extensive warranty options. And I do want to let you know that we did take into consideration our desire to purchase articulated buses in the future. So this wrecker will be able to accommodate those vehicles as well. This wrecker will be able to tow the articulated vehicles, and this purchase will be funded with federal, state, and local grant money. Our recommendation today is that the Board of Directors authorizes the CEO to issue a purchase order in the amount of $533,184 for our new heavy-duty wrecker.
Oh, thank you. That other one is 29 years old, huh?
Yes, we've been pushing it for way too long now.
All right, you've heard the report and the recommendations. Could I have a motion, please?
So move.
Second, please.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we authorize the purchase of this new wrecker. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's passed. We get a new wrecker.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, financial report. Barry.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to give you the financial performance report as of July 31, 2020. You've got that in your packet, and I will just go over the summary verse. The overall net budget variance for the revenues and expense combined year-to-date was a favorable $896,000. And as you'll see on the summary page, I did a year-over-year, rather month-over-month comparison, so you can see the relationships of what happened in each of the various areas. The net operating revenue for the month of July totaled $5.1 million, which was $117,000 favorable to budget, while the net operating expenses for the month was $3.5 million and $779 favorable to budget. And as you'll see, the increase in favorable budget variance from June of 2020 to July was $2.2 million, and obviously, as a result of the fair revenue is the reason for that change. The cost centers, as you'll see, only had one area which was unfavorable, and that was primarily due to the expenses that we did with related to COVID and the like. Sometimes you can't always be certain exactly what level of expense. We know totally how much we will spend, but sometimes we get a little bit more expense than what might have been anticipated in the budget, and that's the primary reason for that. There is one area, though, there's not any trends since we only have just 1 month in the books, so there's not necessarily any trends to look at, but we are looking at the fleet repairs. You know, obviously that's something that we monitor, as well as fuel and other things, big ticket items. But for the most part, we think we're doing good and everything looks good for the year going forward. The COVID-related expenses, as I mentioned earlier, and I gave you a inception to date total. So from the beginning of rather March area till now, we've spent about $5.2 million. Most of that was lost revenue. 3.2 million of that is lost revenue, and the remainder of 2 million for the expenses. And as I'm going through this, if there are any questions that anyone piques their interest, please don't hesitate to let me know. The aging report, as you'll see on your report, shows where accounts payable is 1.5, almost $1.6 million. But 97% of that is in the current bucket, if you will. So we pretty much take care of things throughout the month, and sometimes we get some expenses in late, but for the most part, everything comes in and we take care of them month over month. Our accounts receivable, which is quite large, but what that includes is a number of things, and I'll just kind of give you a high level. But I will talk with two buckets of that. The first part of that primarily deals with our regular accounts receivable as it relates to our jurisdictions and what they owe us, and as we bill them. And so that's probably roughly about a third of that number. And the remaining part of that would be what we call deferred liabilities or deferred revenue. And so that essentially will, over time, with an allocation, as things are earned, we will move those out of accounts receivable into earned revenue. And so that's kind of how that looks. But one point I will make is 97% of that accounts receivable are, and what we've received and what's currently is part of that 97%. It's either current or paid. It's the point I wanted to make on that regard. And I will continue to go forward if there are no questions on the expenses and revenues there. I would like to talk a little bit about the cash flow statement report. And as you look over the cash flow report, it's essentially just an actual expected expenses versus the actual expected revenues and how they ebb and flow throughout our finances month over month. And as you will see in that report, we did get use of the reserves in the first part of the year, meaning July, and what we expect to do based on if things behave as we projected, we should be able to pay that back in the end of this month. But all in all, you know, revenues and expenses are there as we project them. And one thing to note is that this is a cash basis statement, and it's not going to mirror directly to the revenues and expenses, meaning they will to a point, but if you see on the finances where you might see that we only incurred $3.5 million for the excuse me, I'm trying to find my report here, for the expenses for July, what you will notice is that we don't have quite that number in our cash flow statement. Our cash flow statement showed $6.3 million, while we only showed $3.5 million in the revenues for the financial report. And that's to keep in mind because it is cash, and as things come in and as things go out, this is how we report it in the cash flow statement. If there are any questions on that, I will continue to move forward.
Hey, Barry, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just confirm for me on the, you know, our operating ratio is way up. Is that CARES Act related monies, or I see the revenues are high compared to budget. Can you give us a little more feel on that?
Yes, and that's the thing, how the operating contributions factor in or contribute to the financial statements. In certain lines, like the CARES Act money, the operating contributions for the city of Richmond, as well as for the state, they are done on a systematic allocation throughout the year. So each month we allocate the same amount because of how it comes in. But the others, revenue which are earned, they are more closely tied to the budget. So to that point, that variance is primarily because of the CARES Act. So we may have a low month this month in terms of expenses with 3.5, but going forward, those expenses will increase as the expenses are incurred. So this month was lower, next month will be higher, and you might even see that even in the projections. But it's just a timing effect, and so you're going to have those little ebbs and flows throughout the year,
right?
And primarily because of that timing of the budget.
Okay.
Okay. Moving right along, I'll give you a little update on the audit. The RideFinders and the GRTC audits, so they're both underway and on schedule. We're moving right along. We're plugging along, and everything is working well so far. So good. Don't have anything other than that to report on that. So we'll continue to keep that rolling and take care of that. The service agreements, I will want to mention a little bit about the service agreements. Obviously, City of Richmond is good and signed, and we've actually received our first payment just a couple of days ago. Henrico looks good. This with his county attorney. I think we had a few tweaks with the Appendix A that's comfortable to both sides, and so it's with their county attorney now. And as soon as this, it's past this review from there, it will go to the general manager, which I expect to be signed without hesitation. So we expect that to be done and any day now. Chesterfield County is similar. We think we've got all the details worked out with them, and they're having their review, and we anticipate to get that back any day now. Petersburg, we're trying to coordinate. There's a couple of differences that we're looking at, and we wanted to have a conversation with them. We're still trying to work out the scheduling to get that done. I spoke with the general manager with PAT, and he's trying to coordinate with the city attorney, and we're trying to get that conversation. As soon as we get that coordinated, we can work out those differences and take care of that contract. And actually, that is all I have, unless there are questions that came up afterwards.
So, yes, Julie.
Mr. Chair, just to go back a little bit and highlight a little bit of what Barry was talking about with our cash flow, as well as our accounts receivable, the aging report, and our contracts. These are all tied together. that the accounts receivable that's in the report is based on July. So that's one of the reasons why you see that it's very, very high in the current. But some of those, specifically when you look at the amount of money that we're supposed to be receiving from our local partners, has been delayed. Part of that's through the contracts, COVID, and other issues, has significantly affected our cash flow projections, which in the board report is page 68. I'm pleased that we are receiving the money from Richmond. Usually that would have been received or should have been received in July, but it has come in. So that's going to help our September numbers. But if we are unsuccessful in getting our contracts and our payments from our other municipalities, it is possible that when September comes around, we will again need to ask for additional money from the contingency fund to operate, or not be able to reimburse the contingency fund that we were expected to be able to do in September. It's really critical to put the emphasis on how dependent we are on the cash flow from our partners to maintain the cash flow of our operations. And these do impact us and our use of the contingency fund when they're delayed. And understandable with COVID and understandable with the economy being such. And I know that finance is actively working to get these contracts signed and these accounts paid and up to date. But I just want to make sure that the board is aware that these are issues that we are managing and tracking very closely.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Dr. Herring, thank you very much. That's a good piece of work.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so now we have Ms. Thompson with recent and upcoming procurements.
Yes, sir. While we haven't added any new projects to the list, we are moving quite a few of them through the procurement cycle at this time. I want to highlight today 3 that haven't been posted yet. A solicitation hasn't been posted yet. However, I want to bring it to your attention in case you know of any sources, any businesses that would like to do to work with GRTC. And those 3 projects are the employee parking lot, the bus cleaners, and the building window washing services. So please send any business our way. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we have a capital budget that needs to be presented and voted on. Keisha, hi.
Good morning. I will share my screen. Okay, so we're going to go over our current committed project status and also our FY21 spend plan. So our committed projects are those that are already in an executed FTA grant, and then we'll have 3 scenarios to look at as far as our FY21 spend, and then we'll seek your approval. So for our committed projects consist of $11 million. Of that $11 million, 6.3 is in our fleet category, where we have funding for 34 paratransit vehicles that are up for replacement. And we have non-revenue vehicles of 1.1, 550,000 of that is set aside for the record that you just approved. We also have and along with that, in the non-revenue, that's also supervisor vehicles and other support vehicles that are up for replacement. For our IT, we have 3.5 million. Software maintenance takes up 900,000 of that. In hardware, there's $1.9 million of projects. The majority of those projects have all been put on hold due to COVID. The vendors have closed, and now they're opening back up. We're back into negotiations with continuing those projects. Some of those projects are based off of FAIR, so those projects are also still on hold. Some of them are our 4K smart cards. We have the BRT FiOS lines that the city will be putting up. We have a J1708 project, which enhances our fare boxes. We've got PDMs, Spectran validators, and the only project that has continued to move forward was our hardware replacement, replacing computers, phones, and those things that are in the offices.
What are the FiOS lines that the city is doing for the
Some of this,
BRT?
Rob could give you a better explanation of that, but it's at our BRT stations. Some of the stations do not have FiOS lines.
Is that for security?
Well, actually, I can comment on this. What this is it's the city's moving into their second phase of their traffic signal modernization plan, where they're laying fiber optics throughout the city. And as they lay that down, they are going to come in range of some of our remote stations right now that we have to connect via like public internet versus part of the private city's fiber optic line. And so that money is the small, minuscule portion that we have to pay for to tie in to that fiber optic network, like the majority of our pulse stations are.
Thank you.
So we also have within IT our ERP consultant that we are currently going through the bids that came in, and there's some security that's around our Clever emergency alarm system, and it's currently in its testing phase. Planning department has over $500,000 and is going towards signage and bus stop amenities. This is anticipated to be spent by June of 21. Also within our committed projects, we have facility funds, and 175,000 of that 260 is for our front lot repair at the administrative building. It's the front lot for the visitors and employees. Within maintenance, there's 146,000, the shop equipment, and this is for bus wash repairs, engine lifts, and things that are needed in the shop. Within safety, we have additional security cameras. We've got the security consultant that Tony Carter's area is in need of, and we also did some mailroom security. And the human resource, $70,000, that's for employee training. And Tony Carter spoke on some of the training that has already started with the COVID for the employees, and there's other additional training that they will be doing. So now we'll talk about our FY21 funding. So the projects that are in our FY21 capital plan currently total $13.7 million. 50,000 of that is for security for our entrance gates. We have our PM, ADA, and capital cost of contracting, which totals 9.4 million. Of that 9.4, 7.4 is for PM alone. State of good repair, the $1.8 million. 1 million of that is for IT, and that's for our annual software maintenance, which is around 900,000, and then for hardware replacement, which is at 100,000. Our maintenance department, there's a bus exhaust system that needs to be repaired, parts oven and part washers, which have to be purchased. They are at their end of their useful life. Within facility, we have BRT station repairs. We have a facility needs assessment to be done, the transit asset management consultant to be hired, and we're also anticipating purchasing an equipment garage to house some of our outdoor equipment. There's the business improvement category of $1.2 million. That is for 2 Clever enhancements. One is Clever Analytics, and the other is Secure Buses. We have route match improvements and also our short-term transfer center study. Lastly, we have the service improvements, which are for Clever Vision. So our first scenario for funding these projects is dependent solely upon our state match. During the January application process, we anticipated receiving 68% for the majority of our projects from the state. The total for the $13.7 million is broken down by 9.2 federal, 2.4 from the state, and our local portion of 2.1 million, 1.8 of that will be PM, and the projects would require $325,000 from our local partners. The top chart shows how each of the projects are broken down, how the 9.2, 2.4, and the 2.1 is broken down by project. That smaller chart at the bottom shows our current funds for federal, that $30 million, that shows all the apportionments that we have currently from the FTA, but they have not been put into a grant yet. The local portion shows how much we have of local dollars, which does include our funds from Richmond, but they do not include Henrico and Chesterfield's contribution to us for FY21. When we put in our scenario 1 above, the funds that will be remaining is 20.8 from federal dollars and $324 local remaining. Scenario 2 is if we get no state match. If we don't get any state match, all our projects will be put in at 80-20, 80% federal, 20% will be local, and the 13.7 will be broken down as 11 million for federal, and that 2.7 for local, which would be 1.8 for the PM, and our total project amount for our local dollars required would be 900,000 with this scenario. This breakdown at the top shows the same projects all being funded at 80-20. And for the federal, at the smaller chart at the bottom shows that we still have the same amount of current funds, but we will use more federal funds, and the local, we will be short $220,000 if we have to fund all of the projects 80-20, because it will require a higher amount of local dollars. So the outcome of using scenario 2 with no state funds is we will use an additional 1.8 of federal dollars, and we will also require an additional $634,000 for local, because we would end up with 0 from the state with scenario 2. Scenario 3, we will move forward with the no state match, but we will delay our business improvement and our service and health enhancement projects. Our funding will still be at 80-20. We will use 9 million of federal dollars and 2.3 for local, but the projects will only cost 500,000 as opposed to scenario 1 and scenario 2. Scenario 1 only addresses safety, our PM ADA, and our state of good repair. And the bottom chart shows that remaining funds for federal to be allocated, to be executed in a grant will be 21 million, and we will have $271,000 remaining of local funds to use throughout FY21. So the outcome of using scenario 3 is we will have to delay our projects that are in the business improvement and service enhancement. Those clever improvements, the analytics, that is a business intelligence tool which helps us link our drivers to our vehicles. It also does a comparison, it assists in coaching, it improves efficiency and our on-time performance. The secure buses prevents unauthorized users to use the bus. This has been identified as a critical security measure because we don't want other people to be able to access our buses without our permission. Route match enhancements provide new features. It has support, maintenance, and it provides for training. So these clever improvements would be delayed. Our short-term improvements at the temporary transfer center, this will be delayed based off of the state match. Our year-end position And we are currently still in discussion with the city on the next steps for this place, for the transfer center. We don't want to invest a large amount of money into the transfer center if the city is not going to allow us to use it, then we'll end up having to snatch up, which means we've wasted the money and resources for the transfer center. Also, the Clever Vision allows for us to have live displays on our buses in order to communicate with our customers. So all these projects will be delayed if we have to use when we use scenario 3. So for approval. So we are seeking approval to move forward with scenario 3 immediately. We would move forward with our safety, PM, ADA, and all of our state of good repair projects. They will be based off of spending 80-20, 80% federal, 20% local. And we will delay the other projects until we have an understanding of what the state's decision will be. Once we get the state's decision on funding, we will return back to you with our new funding assumptions to move forward with at that time.
So what happens now is you're looking for approval for scenario 3, but not going to execute it until you know what the state's doing.
No, we want to move forward with scenario 3 now. Scenario 3, hold on, let me go back to scenario 3. Scenario 3 will allow us to address safety, our PM and ADA, and will also allow us to do state of good repair. We can move forward with those in a grant, and then when we get the state's decision, we can make adjustments as needed, but those are considered projects that need to be moved forward immediately.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So these are projects that, for the operations of the agency, we don't find that it's prudent to delay them because of some of the security needs and the state of good repair needs. We do know from talking to the state that they're still working through the economic impact of COVID to make funding decisions for transit across the state. That means that they're still working on the operational subsidies that every agency gets, and once they get through that, they'll start to address some of the capital needs. Unfortunately, I don't believe that we can wait too much longer for those decisions to be made, and we have no guarantee of when the state will be able to address it. Again, the economy has really been impacted so severely by COVID. The recommendation that we move forward with a critical project at an 80-20 match is that we understand there's going to be an impact to the local funding and to the federal funding. Should the state come back and provide approval for those and funding for those before we expend it, we would switch over to that state match. But unfortunately, I just don't believe that we can wait for some of these projects with the unknown to the state. We are still hoping for a positive outcome for the funding to come through. The sooner it comes through, the sooner we can go back to a scenario 1 situation as opposed to a scenario 2. But we can't put our operations and our capital work on hold for too much longer. We've been on hold for several months already, and we need to start moving forward with what we have.
So it is possible that we might end up foregoing a piece of state funding because we have to get this underway.
It is possible, and in this case, I believe that it is a modest amount of money, but these are the software we need for our buses, for our ongoing, the operational needs of the system internally and externally. These aren't things that we can stop spending money on.
Are there other questions? So we're going to need a motion to approve this capital budget.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
What is Keisha, can you tell me what is the TAM, consultant assistant?
Transit asset management, that's the requirement with the FTA. So hold on, let me get you the right.
If I can, Keisha, I can add to that.
Yes.
Transit asset management, that's a requirement that we have from the federal government to provide a assessment of all of our infrastructure and assets, our physical infrastructure and assets, and to look at a replacement and a maintenance schedule for them. Our asset management plan that we have in place now was done internally based on some fairly broad assumptions, and what we're finding is that, for example, our roof is leaking and we don't have a replacement schedule or a maintenance schedule to deal with it. Our elevator in our building is consistently breaking down, and we don't have a plan to make sure that it doesn't break down permanently to what repairs or replacement needs. The transit asset management plan, using a consultant, will come in and do an assessment of all of our infrastructure to assess what needs to be done, what's critical to be done now, what can be deferred, and to move forward so we don't have a permanent backlog of deferred maintenance that results in inability to use our facilities. So it is a pretty urgent need that we get on top of this. We were hoping to do it months ago. Again, COVID delayed us, and we need to get this plan in place so we can keep our facility in a state of good repair.
Okay, is this something that Steve was doing?
It was something that Steve did. He did a plan that allowed us to check the box for the federal government that we had it done.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't have some of the details we needed it to do advanced scheduling and prioritization of the needs of this facility.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or about this? You're looking for approval of going ahead with scenario 3 for our capital plan spending, as described by Ms. Reed and yourself. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All right. Let me just say, with regard to the temporary transfer plaza on 9th Street in the city, as you all know, the city is looking at accepting a development proposal for that site, a big one. I think we've all seen it. And so we don't know what's going on that site. If I've spoken to Julie that if that plaza is being used over the winter, even though it's about to be developed, we have to make sure that the shelter stuff is in place and proper. We might have some expenses, but the larger things that would be done to make it a more durable facility, we're obviously not going to be doing if they change things. So we don't quite know if we're going to have a little expenditure there or not, but it's not going to be any big expenditure that we were looking at. Julie, yes.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chairman. And that is just to make sure that the entire board has a little bit more information that I have previously shared with you. I have had a direct conversation with the city of Richmond, Lenora Reed Darona, about the transfer center and about the next steps for it. It was a very productive conversation, and I look forward to speaking with them again on what we can do for the temporary transfer plaza in the immediate and the long term. But like I expressed to you before, I do believe that we need to wait a few more weeks or months before we invest too much there. In case we do need to relocate, we would want to take that investment and put it into the new location, temporary or permanent, versus investing in something that we might have to do. Hopefully we'll be able to come back with a recommendation and more information next month.
I simply wanted to assure our folks in the city that we're going to make sure that whatever we have during the winter, because it'll probably end up being temporary in one form or another, that we're going to do our best to make sure that it's usable and safe, and reasonably comfortable. Thank you for that. All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we approve, that the board approve the FY21 capital budget proposal as made by the staff. Are there any further questions or comments on that? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? the capital budget is approved. Thank you, Ms. Reed. Thank you, Ms. Tim. Barry, we have you again on the operating contingency funds.
Yeah, good morning again.
Good morning.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this is the operating contingency fund policy, and I want to go over a few highlights with you regarding this. During the August board meeting, staff discussed a possible update to the GRTC contingency fund policy to better ensure financial stability of the missions, programs, projects, and ongoing operations of GRTC. Contingency funds for operations are necessary to cover operational cash flow as well as unforeseen operational expenditures or revenue shortfalls. The current contingency policy prior to this particular document is silent on the use of contingency funds being used temporary operational cash flow requirements. And so we want to go over the items 1 and 2, which is the general operating contingency fund. With an annual budget of 60 million, GRTC average weekly outlay is approximately 1.2 million per week. The delayed timing of income and revenues from payments and reimbursements from the jurisdiction, state governments, and federal government create an upfront need for the cash and to make payroll and time payments to vendors until these reimbursements are received. And to maintain a positive cash flow, $5 million of the operational contingent fund shall be designed specifically for operational cash flow purposes. Chief will financial report monthly to the CEO and the GRTC board on prior cash flow and 3-month cash flow projections at each board meeting to ensure the $5 million is sufficient to meet the expenses. And then secondly, we want to extraordinary circumstances related to COVID. We wanted to include this feature as well, or this item during COVID-19 pandemic emergency expenses for the PPE, equipment, supplies, materials, bonus pay for frontline workers, reduced revenues that were covered by Federal CARES Act. The CARES Act funding exceeded the identified need for FY21, and the balance is currently unallocated in order to cover unexpected needs in FY21. So any use of this unallocated funding will require GRTC Board of Approval prior to the expenses. Should other future extraordinary benefit events result in a significant funding to GRTC outside of and exceeding the adopted budget, GRTC will account for such funds separately and to the extent practicable until an approved budget for use of funds can be reviewed and adopted by the board. Obviously, the finance department will be responsible for ensuring that each established contingency fund is maintained and used only as described in this policy. So what the staff is recommending that the Board of Directors approve the updated contingency fund policy as attached to address immediate and ongoing needs to use for existing GRTC contingency funds for monthly operational cash flow.
Okay, are there any questions about this policy as presented? Could I have a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this policy for contingency, operating contingency funds as presented by Mr. Herring. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is passed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Barry, for your work.
Thank you, sir.
To our CEO, Ms. Tim. I am not hearing you.
Thank you. I put on mute because I was told my paper rustling was loud, so I apologize. My report this month is relatively short. First, I want to acknowledge the IT staff for the work they've done putting these virtual meetings together for us. The preparation they did for our IT infrastructure in advance of COVID has made this relatively seamless. For the few hiccups we have on some of the video and some of the audio, I have to say that we are actually a model for a lot of other agencies in this region for how to do good board meetings virtually. I think everyone's found it to be a challenge, and ours is run relatively seamlessly with the thanks of our IT department and their advanced implementation of the technologies we have in place. So I continue to be impressed with how these are functioning. Just a quick update. I know that we already got a full update from Tim, Mr. Barham, about COVID, but just to reiterate, we have had 3 new cases since the last board meeting. Of those, 2 have been in the month of September. Of the cases that we have, 3 people are currently out with COVID, 2 with very mild symptoms. 1 we believe will be returning to work very soon. 1 was just diagnosed yesterday, and the other, of course, with very severe symptoms that we, unfortunately, I can't go into the detail on for HIPAA, but I think as we know, it has been talked about in the press. We are continuing to talk with his family and send our love and support and prayers and everything that we can do to support him through this and his family. We continue to track every opportunity that we can to the quarantine that is impacting our operations. Again, as Tim mentioned, that whenever we do find that there's a possible case of COVID or an actual case of COVID, we do a very aggressive quarantine of any possible contacts so that we can make sure that there is no spread inside the agency. When you look at the low rate of infection within GRTC employees, I believe that while, yes, this impacts our operations and it is very inconvenient for our riding public when we have to miss service, the end result of keeping infections low and keeping our staff and our riders safe and healthy is worth the unfortunate operating inefficiencies. In addition, we know that flu season's coming up. We are going to be implementing the option for operators to have on-site flu shots, as well as encouraging them to get their flu shots outside before we are able to get them here. The health community is swamped with dealing with COVID and with getting the flu shots available. So getting staffing to come on site to provide those flu shots has been a challenge, but we are still working on it. All of our operators, of course, can get the flu shot for free through their health insurance. And we want to make sure that all of our safety and health precautions that are working for COVID will also help prevent any spread of flu simultaneously. It is with great sadness that I bring back up what was already mentioned by Tim in the death of Ernie Loving. Ernie died on August the 31st at the age of 41, definitely too soon. He worked at GRTC for 21 years. His father was a retiree mechanic who worked here, retired in 2008 after being with us for 35 years. Not only that, he used to bring Ernie in to work at GRTC when Ernie was young, and people here knew him as Little Ernie. We went to his celebration of life last week. I learned that he spent his free time restoring, I believe it was a Monte Carlo, and he had 2 beautiful nephews and a beautiful niece who he adored and doted on, and you could see in their reactions, the family of his reactions, how deeply he loved them and how deeply that love was returned. I do hope that we all can spend our lives, however long or short, doing what Ernie did, bringing him joy and sharing that joy with the people that we love. GRTC is a family. We have many people here who have multiple generations who come to work here and spend their time with us and become a larger GRTC family. And I know that many people here were impacted by his loss, and we mourn together with his family. I felt it was important to bring some more details of his life with us as we are a family here. I know that's a serious note to end my report on, but I do ask that we all stay safe and stay healthy and continue to do what's best for our community, for our health of our operators, and for the benefit of the people that we serve. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if there are no questions, that concludes my report for September.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your extraordinary continuing service in directing this organization. We're very grateful for you as we approach the end of your first year of employment here. I think your anniversary is sometime this month, correct?
I believe it's next week. Yes, sir.
I believe so. My report, there isn't any. If you have any comments or thoughts about the for the nominating committee, George will be making a report at the next meeting, so call him. We have to change the date of the October meeting to move it a week later because of the annual meeting of the owners, or what are they called, Bonnie? The stockholders?
Sure.
Yeah, which occurs in October. This is one of our peculiarities. So could I have a motion to move the date to the following Tuesday, which is, I don't know what date it is. 27th?
October. Yes, sir.
Could I have a motion to move the date of the
So
meeting?
moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Comments? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? So let me just say that this year, there will be conversation about the future organization of GRTC. The state has asked us as requiring that to be done. I guess it's the TPO that will try to make it be done, or the CVTA. And I trust that, and have made it clear to the people I can make it clear to, that this board needs to be able to be involved in that conversation in terms of the future organization. Obviously, we have power. The organization of GRTC cannot be changed without our engagement. So we need to be a part of the discussion on how it moves. And that's going to be happening, supposed to be happening by December 1st, although I think there's some indication that that's a rather soft deadline, and that the work can go on into 2021 on that. With that, I'd like to, if there's nothing else to be said, I'd like to close this meeting and move to the executive session. Okay, who's got the executive session stuff? Somebody want to read that?
I move that the board hold a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia to discuss the status and terms of a collective bargaining agreement, because discussion in an open session would adversely affect GRTC's bargaining position.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we move into an executive session.
Mr. Chairman, just give me a moment for the housekeeping.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, at this time, I'd like everyone outside of the members that are allowed in executive session to please leave the meeting. And also for anyone watching the live stream, we will be cutting away for the executive session and the board will return at the end of it. The stream will stay up until that time. And we are back.
Good.
Whereas the Board of Directors of GRTC has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public matters lawfully exempt from the open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certifying resolution applies. And 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Witness the following vote of the board members. Ben Campbell,
Yes.
George Braxton,
George.
All right,
Still there?
yeah,
Gary Armstrong,
Yes.
Eldridge Coles,
Yes.
Ian Milliken, aye. Danny Smith,
Yes.
Good. Thank you. This passed. Is there any further business today? All right. Thank you all very much. We'll see each other a week later in October. I assume we'll see each other.
Me
Okay.
too.
All right. Blessings to you all. Thank you.
All right.